Welcome everybody to another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Blazer, and we have another developer interview lined up today. My guest is from the studio Nodbrim Interactive, and they are currently working on the upcoming game Westmark Legacy, which is going to be a combination of horror, adventure, and turn-based design. And they are on to talk a little bit more about that and whatever other topics we get into. So please welcome to the cast, Martin. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine. Everything's good. Working as usual.
Hello, Pony. Thanks for stopping by. Yep. And what is our time zone difference right now? I think we always have some weird time zones with some of these interviews.
It's 9:35 here, p.m. So it's evening. I'm like, I've done most of my work for today, so just trying to relax. So it's a perfect ending of the day.
Hey, party as well. Well, that's not the worst time zone. I got a few interviews with people from Australia, which I think is like a day and a half. So that's going to be very fun when we get to those. But thank you, Martin, for reaching out and for wanting to come on and talk about your game. As always, for any indie developers watching this right now, if you'd like to come on and talk about your title, game dev, whatever with me, please reach out. My links or my contact information is up there. It's down in the description and all that. So, with that said, since this is your first time on, my first question, as always, is could you talk a little bit about who you are and what is your background when it comes to game dev?
Oh, that's. Should I take the long story or a short story? I started out in visual effects for film and commercials first. Like that was 12 years ago ish. And then after that, like I've always wanted to do like make my own games and all that stuff. So I started. Well, actually, I went to a school that was like back then there weren't that many schools in game dev. So I was like, I found one that was like into 3D and like 3D modeling and all that stuff because it was quite new. So I started there, and then I somehow got into the visual effects industry, and then stayed there for a couple of years. I think it was 5-6 years, and then I jumped ship because it was way too much hand holding and stuff like that. It wasn't creative enough. I felt I needed to like release my creativity somehow. So I kind of just looked for a job within the games industry, and I started off at Star Vault, I believe, was the first gig I got as a UI artist, or GUI designer was the title, but I made mostly art. That was back in Unreal Engine 3 with Kismet and all that jazz. That was interesting. Then I moved on and worked at IO Interactive on Hitman Absolution. That was like a totally different thing because at Star Vault we did an MMO with a team of, I think we were 13 people. So I was there for like the last year of production, and then after release I jumped to IO, and that was like a totally different team where it was like 300 employees, and I was like a small cog in a huge machine, and I did not like it at all. It was a bit too much for me. Like I still did UI for that, and I was like a UI designer, but I was like one out of 10 UI designers, so it was a little bit too much. Like I was just a small little piece, and I wanted to like be more like for the whole thing. So I moved on, and I actually got back to visual effects because that was the easier way of getting like paid and having a stable income. So I worked for Lego for a couple of years, and then I actually moved back to games again. It's been a back and forth thing for me. And then we started Nodbrim Interactive in 2012, if I remember correctly, or 15, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So that's the first title we started off with was Apparatus. It's a turn-based tactical RPG set in a medieval steampunk world where you build your own mechs. Basically, it's on Steam if anybody's curious. That was our start, and I have always been a fan of turn-based games. It's always been in my DNA. I've always played board games, and I love card games and all those things. So I just wanted to kind of experiment and make something different than's already out there. Hence Westmark Legacy, which we're going to get to soon. That part, like this game we're doing now, is just an amalgamation of all the inspirations and experiments I've been doing over the years. So we did Westmark Legacy next. Then that's when we started off with Unity, which kind of made it easier because Apparatus was built with our own engine. That's why that development cycle took 4 years to make that game. So, and Westmark Legacy or Westmark Manor took 3 years, I believe, to make. It's quicker and also like bigger scope and all that stuff. And now we're doing this one, which is even quicker in my opinion. Like we're not done yet, but I can see it goes quicker the more you do, and every project you learn something new.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing in a nutshell, like me.
I was looking at the store pages for Manor and Apparatus, and I guess you definitely have been focusing on turn-based design. I guess what attracted you to focusing on a turn-based for your studio?
It's two-way street. Like I love like real-time stuff, but it's, in my opinion, I think it's easier for me to kind of get my head around the turn-based development and like game design wise, because you have steps you need to follow, and that's easier to kind of realize or imagine when you're developing it, instead of real time where anything can happen at any time. It's also depends on what kind of game you're making, but like for me, I feel like I have all these components, so to speak. Like I'm talking in physical game terms, but it's basically the same thing in digital games, where components you use to make a game. When you're making turn-based games, they're basically like they're there. You can play around with it. You can do the same with real time. It's just it's a passion of mine. I just love turn-based games. It's like all kinds of them. It's not like you're just turn-based genre. I mean, that's a very vast. Like it's like saying animation is a genre, because animation is not a genre. It's like a style. You have genres within animation. So, if that makes sense. I ramble a lot, so you can stop me whenever.
Yeah, and I mean, we both are on the same Discord with Seth, so I think we both certainly like strategy games and turn-based games, and it is a very, I think, interesting genre to develop a game around. Because as I'm sure you know, I'm sure as well as our audience knows, these games are not reflex-driven. It's more about planning and proper strategy than it is about your APM. But of course, that also means that the balance and design needs to be there to make that interesting. And I think there's definitely a discussion. I need to bug Seth about this, I think, after our call, about the challenges of making turn-based exciting. Or how do you make something that is turn-based, I guess, quote-unquote, pop? If you look at something like The Darkest Dungeon, like, they have Wayne June, there's, the camera work, there's that feeling of motion, that when you swing that sword, even though it is turn-based and you're not actually controlling it, you can feel that impact. And I think this is one area where a lot of developers, especially when they start out in the genre, I think they tend to mess up on. Is that we've played a lot of turn-based games where it's like, here's a unit, here's like a bullet shootout, take 3 points of damage, and that's the extent of it. And I'm sure for yourself, with the games you've worked on, as well as the games that you've played, you've probably seen very different examples of kind of making this exciting. And the reason why I brought this up, of course, is that you're working with Westmore Legacy, that it's going to be both a horror game as well as being turn-based. So there's something a lot more to it than just, two sides fighting each other.
Yeah, of course. We have the story element which is going to tie the whole thing together, because you're going to have fights, but fights are limited in that sense, where you can't really add the horror in as you're doing the puzzling, so to speak, because it's different from what I see. Turn-based games coming out all the time, but most of them are rehashes of what's already been done, or very simplistic ways of using cards, for example. So what we're doing is doing a little bit of a twist on the card game aspect, where you're not battling the creature or whatever you're meeting. You're battling with yourself, with using your focus to focus on the board and kind of solving a problem in order to unlock the attack. If you can get what I mean. So it's not like throwing attacks on the creature or thing. You're using different skills or abilities onto the board to manipulate it so it works for your advantage. And then the enemy does the opposite against you on the board. So you kind of work towards each other on the board, and then once you lock in your thing, you can do their thing against the creature or thing, and then it loses its life, and vice versa. So, and the creature has it's the same mechanics as you have. So,
yeah. And looking at like the screenshots for the game, like one thing that like when I'm looking at like the battle scenes, like at a very quick moment, it reminds me of the sense of some of the games that Jake Brigette did with Grey Alien, stuff like Ancient Enemy. Was it a Shadow Blade? I forget the name of it. And like his games have definitely gone like using cards or using like card-based design, or in his case, solitaire. And
oh yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like solitaire meets blackjack, basically. Those are the two like inspirations we used as a base for the game, like that. Sorry, I interrupted.
That's all right. Yeah, and when we see games that go this route, it's always like that very interesting mix of rules and systems. I mean, I've actually seen. Oh, here I just looked up. It's Shadowhand. That's what I was thinking of. That
yeah.
I've seen other developers who, I guess in a very weird way, I've seen a lot more games use like poker and traditional card games as a basis for their own systems. There's this game, Poker Quiz.
In this is abstraction. Like if you abstract something to infinity, and then you get like the nugget of what's really nice with a mechanic, or like a design, that you can take that and just apply it to almost everything. And it's like you need to find the special sauce by distilling whatever is out there, like the games that are available. If you don't want to make something up yourself or reinvent the wheel, I feel it's much easier to take games that are like proven and really like well designed, and then kind of steal in a sense, but just make it your own in a way. So.
So, I guess for my next question for you then, and this is something that I'm curious about whenever I talk to a developer of like a turn-based style game, is how do you, or what was your thought process for creating the rules? And what I mean by that is, as you said, that is a combination of card games like Blackjack, but of course, say into the nth degree in terms of abstraction. So, as a turn-based designer, how did you start with defining, okay, how does somebody play this game? Because, again, with games, with any kind of turn-based game, you are inherently creating your own rule set. It's not like a fighting game or a first-person shooter where we have, like, the basic elements are going to be transferable. And I think, as a quick tangent, I think that's always been one of the challenges of turn-based games, is that, me playing XCOM or me playing Heroes of Might and Magic, those two things don't necessarily cross over all that well.
No, true. Well, I would say for starters, it's iteration over iteration, experimentation, a lot of that in the beginning. What I usually do when I start off with a project is to do a paper version of what I'm trying to do. It's not going to work perfectly well because it's going to be different once you put it in digitally, because a lot of rules and things can be handled behind the scenes and stuff like that. But the gist, like the basics, to kind of try to get them to find what you want to do is easier if you just like sketch some stuff on paper cards or whatever. I actually took a whole poker deck and just took a magic marker and scribbled on it, and that was perfect to just shuffle some cards around. But I mean, the world is your oyster. Just try stuff and then see where you end up. We didn't start off with this is what we're doing and this is exactly how we want to do it. We said like, okay, we wanna have a world map where you go from A to B, and then you explore stuff and stuff happens. We have skill checks because I'm a D&D fan. I really wanted to add that to a turn-based game where you can like level up in a sense, where you can try your different skills in different checks and apply that also into the actual combat scenarios where what you do in the world also affects you during combat. So it was a lot of experimentation. I can't really say one single thing. I mean, I looked a lot at poker in the beginning, mostly because it has a nice choice mechanic where you can choose to hold some cards or like discard and get new ones and stuff like that. But we skipped that because it was too much of a hassle to kind of do the balancing and all that stuff between turns. So we went with just a custom deck where we build a base deck for the player, and then they can add to it as they go along. So they're not building from scratch. We always give them something to start off with because it's easier to balance. Less breakage, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And it also means less downtime as well. Before each run, for each play, of someone having to build their own entire deck. And I guess just to elaborate on, with Westmark Legacy, is it a roguelike kind of formula, or is it more just like of a story-driven like RPG, or nothing of the above?
It's more towards the adventure game type of experience where you go from point A to B. It's branched, so like you have choices along the path where you can't go everywhere. You have to pick where you want to go, and you can't backtrack. So that's a thing. So replayability in that sense, and you have different story points between those points. So you can't see the whole story unless you replay it. Different endings and all that stuff, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it roguelike because it's not that big of a deal if you die. You won't need to retread the whole thing or anything like that. So it's we have save points along the route, so it's not really that in that sense roguelike.
Mm-hmm.
But the combat is a bit challenging at points. I mean, if you make one or two mistakes too many, then it tells you that you're doing it wrong.
I guess as a point about combat, with like the kind of card-based system that you have, are your choices up to, or is there any kind of like RNG in terms of decision making, or is everything deterministic?
card games in general are RNG. Like, it's the nature of it. So you can't get away from it unless you give people like exactly the same cards every time. So that's the one thing. Then you have the thing where the player can control it is by what cards they add to the deck, and different abilities we can turn on and off when you're leveling will help you during battle. But like what comes into the board is usually random at points. But what you can do is control that randomness by your actions, basically. So it's not like random everywhere. Like it's selective randomness, if you want to say that like that. You have control, but you don't have full control. So. But I like random because it doesn't make the game too stale, and like you get some variation every time you play. Because a lot of card games can be a little bit stiff when you get like same cards every time. Or yeah,
you are certainly turned to the right person in terms of liking randomness in their games.
To a degree, like there are games that are way too random for me, like Hearthstone, for example, and stuff like that. So
yeah, I can play Monster Train and Slay the Spire, but I am terrible at stuff like Hearthstone and Gwent and that kind of thing.
Gwent. Gwent is like my favorite card game now. It's you can actually strategize in it.
I'm writing my next book on deck builders, and I need to at some point go back and get back into Gwent. It has been a long time since I played Gwent. This was before they did their second major rebuild.
Yeah, you should definitely get in. It's way better now. Also, like I'm more of a card game player for physical stuff than like digital, because I feel that there's more variety with physical card games than with digital ones. That's why I'm making this, because I feel there's a niche that it needs to be filled. So yeah.
One thing that I wanted to go back to, as you were saying earlier, with like the enemies, like design natural encounters, the enemies are operating on like the same rules as the players. Is that right?
Yeah, but behind the scenes, so you don't see what they're doing. You only see their like timer counting down, and once they hit 0, they actually hit you. Or whatever they have different abilities as well. So sometimes they can just give you a curse, and then you have a bleed, so you have to get rid of that and stuff like that. And sometimes you boost up yourself with shields, and then they hit you with bleed, and you're gonna die anyway because the shield doesn't really protect you from bleed. So it's a fun little mechanic. So yeah.
Yeah, the reason why I want to ask you about this is that another aspect of turn-based games, so I'm sure for any turn-based designer watching us live or record have struggled with, is how much do you mirror the two sides? As in, does the enemy have the same abilities and tools as the player? Does the player get the same abilities and tools as the enemies? And we've seen turn-based design and even real-time games go in wildly different directions. If you look at something like an XCOM, it is built on asymmetry. That you're not going to be able to do everything that's sectoid or, oh man, I can't really forget the name of it. The things that turn people into zombies, which I'm sure every XCOM fan is yelling at me right now.
I know what you mean. It's been a long time since I played XCOM.
And yeah. There was a game that I played last year, Labia Runa, which was a very deck builder, visual novel, just a completely insane mix of genres and design. And one of the things that they did was they tried to make the enemy, very similar, that they're drawing cards and I'm drawing cards. But the enemy clearly gets, special luxuries in terms of their design to make this a challenge, because it was just a normal fight that wouldn't be anything special. Same goes for a game like Darkest Dungeon. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, when you're trying to come up with like an interesting design or interesting battles or situations, how do you decide, I guess, what to give the enemy without just flat out, giving them an I win button, or just saying, oh, this enemy can poison, stun, bleed you, and kill all your resources, and you get nothing. So enjoy.
Yeah, well, there is a fine balance where you can get too much of the good stuff for the enemy, so to speak. But like, what I do is I just make a list, and then I rate them as best, good, and really like lousy abilities or skills they have, and then apply them to the different enemies. And they're all stat based or like mechanics driven, so to speak. So you can give an enemy a feature where they can either stun you or give you like a pushback or whatever, like give you garbage cards. So they shoot cards into your deck without you willingly wanting it, but you're drawing them. And then you have to kind of get rid of them because they're just junk in your hand. So you kind of need to use them. Otherwise, you're just going to sit with a lot of crap in your hand. So like that's a neat mechanic for an enemy. It's just sitting and like pondering about like what would be cool to add to this enemy that would make life lousy for the player, not as lousy that they want to quit the game. It's just gonna be like like you have a fork, you can poke them a little bit now and then to make them irritated, but don't poke them too much because then they're just gonna rage quit or whatever. And then you need to balance that out with giving the player abilities or ways of handling whatever comes their way. So it's like a big push and pull kind of thing where if you push too much, you're not going to pull enough. And yeah.
For the people watching, there's your game dev tip for the episode. Game dev is poking the player with a fork. just don't do it too hard.
Yeah.
And what you just said there is a very important point. Is that in this one we did a few of our roundtables about is how hard do you want to make the enemy? Like how much of a challenge should there be? And it's a very tough line to walk. Some people like those games where the enemy is just Grandmaster at all times. They get every best card, they get every best pull. And there's a lot of people who don't want to do that. They don't want to, here's my card, and the enemy plays 15 cards all perfectly lined up, and you die. That was my experience when I was playing Hearthstone, where I was like, I'm a new player, I'm going to play this one card, and the enemy plays like 5 legendaries in a row at me. I'm like, well, I'm kind of screwed.
It's even more different for multiplayer. That's a whole can of worms I don't want to open.
Oh,
but,
yes.
When it comes to difficulty, like it's a fine line. I learn this every time I make a game. It's like I don't think even like players think about this, but you just need to change one single variable or like aspect of an enemy, and they become suddenly like gods in the game. It's like if you have to tweak it very finely to make it work as you intend to. Otherwise, it'll get way too hard or way too easy. So it's like a very, very balanced thing. And like we're hopefully planning to kind of get all the difficulties in so we can switch between them. But it's too early to say how that's going to work. But hopefully we can get that balance as well. So, but now we're aiming for like the mid difficulty, and then we can just kind of tweak it to harder or easier, and that'll be also not a hell for us to play. So
here's a question for you and for anyone watching live or recorded. What, like, going back to the poking the player, the fork, in terms of creating like interesting mechanics or attacks the enemy can do, do you have any particular favorite, I guess, gotchas that an enemy can do? Like, some examples would be like, as you said, like putting trash cards in your deck, or let's say raising the cost of a resource, or even actually just deleting one of your cards with a special ability.
I wouldn't change resource costs and stuff like that, because that's a little bit on the illegal kind of stuff. But like just stuff you can give the player that they don't want it's the best kind of thing you can do. Like, give them curses, and they can deal with that. Give them like cards they don't want; they can deal with that. Don't just hit them with a stick. Like, don't make a creature kill them because they're super strong. Uh, Make it gradual in that case. Like, give them an ability that makes them buffed up like every turn, and then they just hit you with the big sledge, and then the player actually can expect that, so they can work against it bit by bit, turn by turn. Because that's why I love turn-based games. You can actually plan and structure your gameplay towards what is against you, basically.
Yeah, and I think like the game that I think really like pushed that kind of mentality, I think, was Slay the Spire. I think that was the first time, at least for me, that it actually gave you accurate turn predictions. It told you, hey, this guy's about to do 20 points of damage, or he's about to poison you. What do you do? And I find that so much more engaging, I think, as a player to know that. Oh, what was that?
I think it was one of the first games that lets you dig into your discard pile as well. I don't remember any game doing that. That was an interesting thing where you can actually deduct how many or what cards you have left in your deck, so you can like figure out what could be coming next. That's a very like magic kind of way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always find that to be more interesting, because I think it really lends itself well to the strategy. I guess here's a question for you as well regarding like Slay the Spire. Did you ever take the perk or the item that removes unit predictions? Like, for me, like, I can't do that. Like, I need to have that, or I cannot figure this out at all.
No, yeah, I'm the same. Like, I love that feature. Like, I wouldn't want to take that away. It's like it's built to work that way, and taking that away is a fun little thing, but I don't think it would make the game better. Like, if you think about it from a game designer perspective. So, but yeah, it's a neat little relic. Like, we have relics in our game as well, which are basically buffs that you unlock on the board instead of just having them as passive abilities. So,
As another question for you, with regards to iterating on Westmark Legacy and just this kind of constant refining of these mechanics. As a developer, I'm sure for any other developers who work on turn-based design, I was probably curious about, how do you, I guess, measure, or how do you like look at your game and go, okay, how does this play? Like, how do I need to iterate on this? Like, I'm sure you've done a lot of playtesting, or you've had playtesters check it out by now.
Yeah. We have friends and close people that can kind of try it out, and in some cases actually stream it, so I can watch them while they play, and that is usually the best way of doing it, because you get the reaction. You can actually not tell them what to do, but like hint or like ask them questions of how they feel and how they react to stuff, because that's something they forget quite quickly once they quit the game and maybe fill out the form or something. It's better to catch it live or even record it, and then you can watch it later. But we've got some really nice opinions, and like find people with strong-willed-minded individuals, because they are like the harshest critics, but also like it's useful information. You have to take everything with a grain of salt, because they're like they have biases or like other expectations or whatever. So you have to kind of see it from their point of view, and then see it from your point of view, and then kind of do a little game dev thoughts and shake it around and see what you can come up with to like make it better or solve a problem that comes up, or anything like that.
Yeah, and a major point about playtesting, I think going back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, is about the difficulty. That you're kind of aiming Westmark to be kind of like in the middle right now in terms of the balance, and then of course you can tweak things easier or harder. But
Yeah.
with a turn-based game, especially anything that has RNG, I always find it very tricky when it comes to figuring out, okay, how easy or hard is this game? Because obviously, if you're playing a game built on RNG, if you get every best card, it's going to be very easy to play. If you get every bad card, or getting every random card, in like Slay the Spire, suddenly becomes a lot harder to actually get a win. So, I guess in your opinion or your thoughts, what do you think about in terms of balancing to make a game like this easy, medium, or hard?
Yeah, that's the hard part. Like, I feel I'm not a great gamer. Like, I feel I'm really lousy at my own game. My friend who's the programmer, Christopher, he's a little bit better at it, and he tends to make it a little bit harder than I want it. So we're kind of jumping back and forth between us, which is kind of good because he's probably aiming for the little hardcore kind of niche, and then I'm aiming for the like Joe Schmo who just loves to kind of play around. So ending up somewhere in the middle is probably good. The hard part is to kind of get there. Like what we've been struggling with is getting the deck you get as base balanced enough because it's all the RNG. We basically you have 5 card hand from the start, and that's the max amount of cards you can hold,
Mm-hmm.
and that way you can kind of deduct or like figure out how the deck, the amount of cards in the deck will be counted as how many cards you actually draw during a session, like a combat session, basically. And then you have different abilities and things that kind of give you cards to your hand and stuff like that. So that'll also kind of get into how duplicates are handled because we have more than one card. No card is unique, so that's also a thing. So it's a lot of things to think about. It's like if you want headaches, go turn-based card game. Then you're gonna have plenty of problems to solve.
Mm-hmm. And especially when it comes again to balancing this with the enemy's abilities. As we've said, like it's very tricky when you give the enemy the same abilities or similar moves as the player, because then the player can throw them right back at them. And we've seen different degrees of, I guess, breaking when it comes to playing these kinds of games. Like there are people who have beaten Slay the Spire on like max ascension and they find the game easy now. And there are probably people who have never even managed a single win in that game.
Yeah, I don't see it as breaking the game. I see it as conquering the game. Like yeah, they played it enough, so they deserve the accolades and praise for being awesome. Like if you break our game, kudos to you. Like yeah, you should deserve a medal or something. And we're not gonna patch it out. We're just gonna see what we can do to make it like more stable for players that are better.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of it. Like you can't really fix everything, so you kind of have to go with the punches and see what you can do to make it flow, game design wise.
Mm-hmm.
So
For Westmore, I guess another question. Do you use any kind of like rarity system for the different cards? Like do you have, normal, rare, legendary, so on? Or is it everything kept very like generalized?
oh, that's a good question. I think my friend is better equipped for that part. I don't remember how we did it. I think we have rarity, but it's nothing you will see on the cards. It's more back end stuff. Uh, it's something that isn't really that. I mean, what we do have is if a card is unique or not, and that'll play into how cards will get drawn and all that stuff. But what you get when you buy cards in the game, they are usually unique, and usually they're rare because you don't get to buy them often. Like you have one chance every other step on the road, basically, and they all have the same cost. Like so, one card is one cost, no differences between cards. That way, we can balance the actual card itself and not the cost against each card. So it's just easier for us and easier for the player to kind of just figure out, okay, I want a card. This is how much. Okay, which one do I want? It's more of what fits your deck instead of what fits your pocket, basically.
That's actually a really good point there about games or card based game that has costs versus those that are more or that are just about I play a card a turn, every card has the same cost to it. Because that again, like that is another major point when it comes to turn based and card based designs.
Oh yeah, a lot of games have action points and that sort of stuff, and we started off with that, but we skipped it because it felt so obtrusive and like kind of in the way. You had to do a lot of counting back and forth. So what we did is just you can draw and put any card you want, as long as it fits and works. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's up to the player to kind of use their noggin to kind of figure out where to put the cards in right order in order to win. So it's a little bit, but it doesn't work for every game. For our game, it works perfectly because you have a board, you have a set amount of spots you can use the cards on, and all that stuff. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And a pony problem question, which I think actually fits what I was going to mention. What is your philosophy, or how do you design a card for a game list? Again, as we said, every game is different in this respect. So what's kind of the philosophy for Westmark in terms of how do you build a card that's going to be in this game?
Yeah, the beginning was kind of hard because we didn't really know exactly what we needed. So we kind of guessed a lot, like, okay, we maybe need this, maybe need that. So we added some cards, and then we just started to play and see where it faltered. So at this point, I see a lot of like I play this a lot, and then I see, this would need a card like this, and then sometimes we even take away cards because it feels like, okay, the design has changed a little bit, and now we don't really need a combine card because the combine doesn't really work in this like constellation, so to speak. So we exchange that with something else that works better with what we have, and like it needs to be filled, basically. So like instead of just making up stuff that you push into the game, you kind of need to find something like a way of solving a problem instead of creating problems.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, like with the cards being unique, I guess as another to kind of build off of that, do cards have, I guess, are there quote unquote builds in Westmark? And what I mean by that is, when you look at a game like a Slay the Spire, if you want to go, let's say, a poison based strategy, there are different cards for poison. If you want to go block, there's different block based cards. Do you have like cards that are kind of, I wouldn't say duplicates, but they serve the same roles? Or is every card essentially designed to be like a one off? Like, this is a card that will do bleed, and there are no other cards that do bleed. This is the card that debuffs, there's no other cards that debuff, that kind of focus.
I know what you mean. Yes and no. Like what we've done is we've built like the player progression as a pyramid, basically. So the base is your stats, and that is like what we call it persona, which is basically a fancy way of calling your like stats. You have mind, body, and soul. Those are the three choices the player does to level up. Mind is for the tactician, kind of mindy person who loves to kind of plan ahead and kind of do tactical stuff. Body is like brute forcing. You do a lot of damage, but you're kind of a little bit unsure with health and stuff like that. And then you have the soul, which is basically you're sort of a trickster, a necromancer, sort of a thing where you steal health by dealing damage or stuff like that. So those three personas we use as like a base for our design, and then we apply that to the cards. We apply that to the enemies. even the enemies are also based on the persona, 3 different tiers of like characteristics, so to speak. So you can meet a body enemy, you can meet a soul enemy, you can meet a mind enemy. All this is dealt with the back end, so the players won't really know it, but they will probably notice it. So you can kind of plan ahead once you figure out, okay, this enemy looks like he's going to deal a lot of physical damage, so maybe I need to kind of boost up my shield stuff. So because you get kind of like hard to explain all the game design in one go. In the inventory, you equip items that you bring into combat, and in combat, you basically solve the puzzle to unlock the items that you have equipped. So if you understand what I'm saying there. All the items are also based on the persona triangle, like a pyramid thing. So you have persona items, you have soul items, you have mind items. The same for relics; they're also equipable. So you have a certain amount of slots you can fill, and then each battle has 2 stages where it's like you do the combat stage where you do the puzzle thing. Once you solve the item and lock it in, you do the attack, and then you pick the one equipped item you have to do another go. And you do the puzzle thing with the board, and then you do that over and over till you kind of win.
With the different personas, is it like kind of like a rock paper scissors system that one will do more to one, do less to the other, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we looked at what the player has in form of currency. I'm talking more of like health and shield and dodge and stuff like that. We call it currency because you use it during combat as a way of surviving and not dying and beating the enemy in certain ways. So, for example, you have the soul character uses a lot of health in order to beat the enemy, and not as much hitting the enemy with a weapon or whatever, but they're using their health as a weapon against the enemy. So you can basically hurt yourself in order to hurt the enemy. And like the brute force thing with the body, you have weapons that can deal a lot of damage, but they need to be like locked in on the board in a certain way, and that is yeah. It depends on what you want to do. Like, do you want to do a lot of damage? Then you kind of go for the body build, but you can mix, so you don't have to go like straight line on the leveling up thing. So because you unlock different abilities on every turn, so and you can't fill them all. Like you can only fill one at each tier, so you have 5 tiers of abilities on each mind, body, and soul. So it's basically a 5-point grid with 3 rows.
Okay.
Pick one each time.
A few questions. Pony asked, what's your experience with Magic the Gathering, and did that influence the design in any way?
Oh, I played it a ton when I was younger. I am now playing a ton because I really came back to it with my girlfriend. So I've spent way too much money on that right now. But it's interesting game design. It has changed a lot since I played, and but I still love the meta and all that stuff. It's just a bit hard to get into as opposed to other card games. But it has a lot of like lovely synchronicities with cards and abilities and all that stuff, which I really want to do myself if I have the chance someday. Yeah.
Let's see. Another question from Pony. Do you have alternate win conditions, and what are the win conditions for a match in the game?
Win conditions: don't die, kill the enemy. Yeah, we had to keep it simple because the main goal is to solve the board, and solve the board without you dying is the main goal.
Right.
So it's like you need to balance your health opposed to what you have on the board. and whatever the enemy comes throwing at you.
All right. As another question regarding like the balance and design, do you have, I guess, quote unquote boss fights in Westmark, or is all the encounters, I guess, like general enemies, that kind of thing?
We started off with the game when we built it with the notion of we don't want to make this game where you slaughter tons of minions to get to a boss. I was more in line of you're meeting a boss every time you fight, and it's not like every encounter is going to be a little bit special, a little bit different. So it's not going to be like jogging through like an endless void of enemies. So it's we're making a shorter type of game where you can replay it often, get a little bit of difference in every encounter, but you're not gonna like Slay the Spire is basically encounter after encounter all the time throughout the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Our game is a little bit more paced as a little bit story, giant fight, story, giant fight. Sometimes it's a little bit more story, sometimes it's a little bit more fight, and then the end. And then depending on which way you go, you get a little bit different of pacing, basically.
Okay. So, as you were saying, there are different like endings or different story routes, but like once you're in the story, you're kind of settled on this path. Like I was looking at the store page, I noticed you have kind of like the kind of like classic like node-based map where you're going from node to node, path, point of interest to point of interest, and then get to the end.
Exactly, and the different points, the different nodes, as you say. Have different things in them. Like sometimes it's a story node, sometimes it's just a surprise. You don't know what it's going to be. Sometimes you see that it's going to be an enemy, so you can kind of plan ahead. Sometimes it's just going to be like a story node with an enemy inside of it. So you once you hit the dialogue, you're kind of going in for a fight, so you don't know it until after that. And then sometimes it's just basically you're coming to a merchant, you buy some cards or whatever. So we have different types of nodes you jump on along the way, and then at some point, the road is going to split into 2 or 3, and then at some points, depending on choices you make inside dialogues, it's going to give you like hidden routes that you haven't seen popping up instead of the standard routes. So the standard route will be replaced basically. So there's room for a lot of like replayability and kind of surprises and stuff like that we can add in.
Okay. A few more questions from Pony. How complex or skillful can I expect the AI to be? He's talking about some games like Hearthstone, how the AI makes up for its odd plays with OP cards or rule breaking, while other games are more about the AI playing perfectly.
It's not going to be much of a you play against the enemy because you're going to play against the board, and the board can give you basically everything and anything. The enemy will kind of shoot in sometimes, like cards or things onto the board, and even on your like slots at the bottom, which you need to kind of lock in to get your item activated. Sometimes they put curses on them, so if you lock that in, you get the curse, but you need to lock it in order to lock in your item. So basically, you're gonna sometimes screwed. They're time based, so if you wait a couple turns, it'll go away. So there's different ways of kind of. I mean, the enemies themselves have their own abilities. And they can sometimes affect you in different ways, like the toad basically on your image there on the YouTube. He spits acid on you, so you get a little curse that is just your acid acidified or whatever you call it. So it just drains you of like your shield slowly, and then you have a drunkard on the streets. He's throwing alcohol bottles on you, and once you get hit a certain amount of times, you get an ailment called what's it called? Alcohol I don't remember, but like you get drunk basically. That affects your stats as well. So
Okay.
yeah, every enemy is going to be a little bit different and fun to kind of explore. So it's not like standard card games where they just stand and hit you all the time. Some do, but like some can be a little bit special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having like those special conditions or special rules for enemies, I think it definitely adds flavor to the game. I recently tried that game, Castle Morihisa, and like a samurai take on Slay the Spire, and
Yeah.
what they kind of did was like every enemy had like some kind of special rule or condition that kind of messed with how you're going to fight them. And it's always tricky when you're coming with like rules like that because you're never quite sure if is this one special rule just too powerful, or is it just who cares? The enemy maybe draws one extra card, big whoop.
Yeah. Exactly. No, there's a ton of those special kind of games. I love to find those because a lot of stuff that gets hyped up is just basic rehashes of old mechanics. I just like to find new kind of fun things to explore. That's why I'm making this, because I want to do like special stuff, enemies that are interesting and fun. That's why we play, don't we? To have fun.
I hope so. Or to get pain and bad RNG.
Oh yes, yes. The fork. You want the fork.
There you go. I guess as another question, in terms of length, like how long do you estimate, I guess, a single run or a single adventure of the game to take?
Kind of hard to say at this point. I mean, I've written the script, so I know how long the script itself is, but that's not the game itself. So it depends on how long the player plays each combat, because my combat scenarios have been varying from like 5 minutes to 15 minutes each play. So, like, I mean, for one encounter, uh, but we have like more than 10 or 15 encounters already in that are kind of planned for like demo and stuff like that. We're doing a demo, so that's already out there. So it's not out there, but like everybody kind of knows about it now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I'm estimating about what was it, 15 to 20 hours for one play session, like from start to finish. If you just kind of run through the whole thing, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much it's gonna take for like a normal paced person to play through it. um, I'm usually just skipping all the dialogue because I wrote it all, so I kind of know what everybody's saying.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And to Pony's question, there aren't any, like, as we said, like, this is not really built on, like, a roguelike or a roguelike design. Like, there's no carryover between runs, is there?
no, no. Basically, if you die, you're gonna just reload from the last checkpoint on the map, because we have checkpoint nodes. So once you hit that, you get an autosave, and
Mm-hmm.
you're good. And next time you die, you're just gonna get back there. So whatever you lose on the way, you lose, and then once you replay that, you're gonna hit a uh, different randomization of the enemy and different items and stuff like that every time.
Okay.
So it's not gonna be the same run after you've died. So you can't really count on getting that item back if you lose it. So you keep that in mind. But it's not like a roguelite at all. I wouldn't say. I mean, death isn't a punishment in this game.
Are there any, I guess, like, account-wide unlocks or things that, if you're playing the game, you can unlock an item that can appear in subsequent runs, or is everything kind of like available from the start and it's more about the RNG of what you get?
Yeah, it's the RNG and what you get and how you kind of use it along the way. Uh, I mean, there are gonna be like new game plus stuff, but I can't really say what is yet because it's still kind of early in the planning. But there is going to be something, if you finish the game once, you can run it again at different difficulty, or like added little bonuses or stuff like that. So it's so yeah, so you get like something for running the game again. Instead of just running through and picking new routes. It's fun, but like you want something else as well. So.
Mm-hmm. And to Pony's question, do you have any examples of cool rewards or items that you can get in the game?
Oof. I don't want to spoil too much. I mean, they're usually like I have a weird sense of humor, so you will notice some strange things popping into your inventory. I can tell you about like Westmark Manor, like the game before this. It's not a turn-based game, but we had a lot of like funny items. I gave people the Ring of Death, and people wondered what it was, and they used it, and then they died. So like, it's like I have a weird sense of humor, so stuff like that just gets me every time. um, yeah, we have lots of stuff like that kind of strolled around the game, but it's not going to be game breaking because sometimes you just get an item and you're like, I'm not going to use it. So like, we have consumables in the turn-based game, so like consumables will be the way I'm going to troll with people in the game. So.
I'm looking at the screenshots for the game. Are all encounters 1v1, or will there be, 2v1, that kind of thing?
It's just going to be standard you against the board, and then enemies can look different. I mean, we have crows, so there are more than one, but it's still one enemy in the technical sense. So no, it's not going to be more than one.
Okay.
But you can go more than one in a row. So like if you defeat one enemy, another pops up in the middle and kind of disrupts you, like so you won't get to the map. You get another kind of enemy thing. So that could happen.
All right. Okay, as a quick time check, we are just over an hour in. I'm trying to think if there's anything else design-wise. Pony asks, will using an item take up my turn when it comes to, I guess, consumables and such?
Consumables, no. You're using all the inventory stuff is going to be dealt on the map, so it's not going to be in the actual combat itself. So once you're done with combat, you can go back into your inventory, use some items or whatever, equip items and stuff like that. But you can't equip or unequip or use items while you're in combat. So you need to kind of prepare before you go into a battle. So it's separated that way. And also everything in the game is basically your map is your hub, and then you have your persona menu, your inventory, deck menu, notebook. Those are like live. So once you're in a dialogue, for example, you can jump into inventory and play around there and go back to the map where the dialogue is, and you can just continue the dialogue then. So you're not locked into a thing, so you can always play around.
Okay. Let's see. Lucas asks, what's your opinion of giving higher HP to enemies to increase a game's difficulty or longevity?
That's a cheap way of doing it. I mean, higher HP just makes them more spongy. That's all. I mean, it's good to do a little bit, but just doing that to make a difficult enemy is not enough. It needs to be special or interesting.
Yeah, and I think as another point, like to add on to that, it can also really render a lot of cards and tactics less viable if you raise the health to the point where, okay, this card does 2 points of damage, but now, enemies have 40 points of health. Okay, this card is now worthless. And that was one of the things I didn't like so much about, like, Slay the Spire, and to a lesser extent, Monster Train. But Monster Train was definitely more about coming up with synergies and, overpowering your damage. Where with Slay the Spire, something just felt like, once I got to a certain level of Ascension, a lot of cards just was like, like, they're just not useful anymore.
Yeah, it's the fine balance with the enemies. You usually tend to leave the health alone, or like don't raise it too high. So you have like a limit where you go like not too low, not too high, and then focus on what they actually can do to the player instead of just what they can absorb, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Let's see. Pony asked, if it wasn't covered, what's a general turn like? So I guess what is like the flow of a round in the game?
the flow of the round, like if you have more than one item equipped, you get to choose what item you want to use. That's
Mm-hmm.
the first thing, and then you actually pick one, and the board kind of comes up, and then focus cards, basically numbered cards, are dropping in. Every time you use a card in your hand, the turn kind of moves on. So then cards move down one step. So they move down step by step, and you kind of need to plan out how the number cards are going to fall in. Uh, the bottom row is basically where you lock in your item. Your item has a goal. The goal is the numbers set off on the different slots, and once you hit that number, the numbered slot, it gets locked in. So basically, that row can't go down to your fill up. Like a card can come down, and another card can come down on that, and just add it up. So basically, 2 comes down, and then another 2, then you have 4. So that slot, if it's a 4, then you lock that in. If you catch my drift, that's the basics of the mechanic. And then you have your cards in your hand where you can manipulate the board by moving cards to left, right, down, up, or gonna remove them altogether or combine them, or freeze the board so you can do more than one move. You can add cards to the board, so you can do a combination of moving left with another left, so you can move a card left to that left card so it moves left again. So you can basically do 2 moves with 2 cards without uh, turning the turn, so to speak. So because when you put a card on the board, it doesn't count as a turn. Yeah, it's harder to explain that I actually like when
And
playing it.
I guess like just to clarify then, because I wasn't sure of this myself, when you're playing cards, like when you're on your board, does the enemy have their own board, or are they interfering with the board that's like on the screen?
They don't have a board. They have a counter that ticks
Okay.
down to their like ability kicks in, and what they can do, like once that ability kicks in, they can throw in a card. They can do whatever. Like they can do. That's their turn to shine, basically. So they can do whatever they want. Like they can throw in curses at you, hit you. They can add things to the board or manipulate things. So you're basically fighting against that counter. But once it hits, you're kind of fighting against that as well. So
Does the counter go down every time you play a card, or is there like a specific condition for it?
every time you're activating a turn,
Okay.
which is basically using a card in your hand, then it kind of turns. Unless you put a card onto like an empty slot on the board, then it doesn't count as a turn.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
Let's see. Let's see. Question came in. Where was it? All about that one. Okay. Avery wanted to know how much of a focus is on synergy in terms of specific builds. Is it more about you building like that one, super strong, perfect combo like in a Slay the Spire or Monster Train, or is it more like a battle of attrition?
it's a little bit of both, but like we try to focus to do a really good synergy between all the cards in your deck, and so no matter what cards you have, like okay, some cases you will have problems, but usually you can always take yourself out of a pickle. Like if the board kind of looks funky with like you need another slot locked in before the enemy hits you to hit him before. So like yeah, it's just you can see what's gonna come, so you can plan ahead. If you do that, usually it goes really well. If you're just gonna throw cards will nilly, it's not gonna work. A lot of people try, and usually they fail. So it's a matter of like you need to plan and you need to kind of work with what you have. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, synergies. We're trying to kind of get that working as well as possible.
Let's see. A question from Lucas. Is it possible to fix the issue of turn-based games where player one has an intrinsic advantage as they start first?
Can you repeat that? I didn't.
Is it possible to fix the issue in turn-based games where the one who goes first gets an intrinsic advantage of playing the first card?
That's a hard question. Every card game has been battling this for ages. Luckily, we don't have that problem because you're always going to go first. But I don't know. Like, I think Magic has a nice solution where you just basically roll a dice, see who goes first. Random usually helps. Because if you set a rule for who goes first in whatever way, there's always going to be someone being angry or stingy about it.
Let's see. And the opponent was asking regarding the deck design, is it going to be more open-ended and flexible, or more decks build themselves? And like highly thematic and more focus?
You can choose whatever you want to do. You will have one starter deck that we determine, and then you can manipulate that however you want with the tools we give you. So basically, you can buy new cards if you want. You can just go with the starter deck throughout the whole game. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, I think, but depending on how you level your stats, it's going to affect. That's going to have more effect than you picking a different set of cards for your deck. The cards are more of a help for you to kind of defeat the enemy better and faster and more smoothly. And some cards are better suited for some builds, like stat-wise, than others. So there's a min-max solution for everything, of course.
And speaking...
Yeah, they're asking deck size, and no, we don't have a limit, but we were going to give you a limit because there's only that many spots where you can get cards. So.
I was just about to ask about the deck limit as well. Another question I had regarding the stats. Is this a case where like your stats, I guess, influence like your cards, or do they just influence like the amount of damage you do, the amount of health, that kind of thing?
Stats influence not the cards themselves, but the board, the state of the board, and the stats, like the resources you have, like your shield, your dodge, your health, your whatever you want to mention there. Like there's a lot of stats to keep track of. You have a redraw even, and that is a resource as well. Redrawing like your whole hand is limited to once per combat, but that can be manipulated as well with the different stats and stuff like that.
All right.
We're not changing the cards in that sense because otherwise it would be a nightmare to balance. Too many aspects of a design can make it a bit of a soup at the end. Soups are bad, but
let's see. Pony also asks, "What's your favorite card and why?" That isn't spoiling much. If you don't want to reveal anything too dastardly.
No, I don't know. I don't have a favorite. I have a favorite combo, if you want to call it that. Like move left on the board and then combine is kind of nice. Because once you do like a move left, all the cards move down, and then you can combine them into one, and then it goes down again because it's a turn when you combine. So like you basically make a little programmable kind of thing on the boards where you can sync cards into each other and make them move without using too many cards. It's kind of fun. So you can basically go from 3 turns till you need to be finished with your item to just using 2 or 3 cards without using a turn, then it kind of just goes into like a ballet, into locked, and then you're done. But yeah, we're going to show those later when we have a trailer and all that stuff.
Let's see. All right. I do want to spend a few minutes talking about the Kickstarter that you have planned for the game. But before we get to that, any other design-related points that we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up?
I think I ran through the whole game. I don't know. There's so many things you can talk about for ages about game design, about like turn-based horror and all that stuff. Yeah, no, I don't think unless anybody has a question. My brain is kind of mush right now.
All right. So I think with that, let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter, and that will take us to the end for the cast. I figure another, I would say 10 to 15 minutes, if that works for you. Mm-hmm. And for the chat, I guess I will be saying this will be last call for questions, because once we're done with the Kickstarter, we'll wrap things up there. Let's see. Question just came from Pony. Are there any Magic the Gathering archetypes I can build in this game? Things like mid-range, ramp, aggro, and so on.
Oh yeah. Well, I mentioned the 3 personas. That's basically what I tried to do with archetypes. They're not color-coded or anything like that fancy, but it's like it's the mind, body, soul. Like if you want to be the brute force kind of guy, like basically the red archetype in MTG, like or the mana color. Basically, that's what I'm going for. That's it. And then you have soul is basically black and white combination. And if you have mind, I would say that's like blue, very blue, in that sense. It doesn't play the same as Magic, but it's kind of the same persona, I think.
Let's see. Ben's comment. I don't know there's any space skeletons, although I guess skeletons are Lovecraftian.
Oh, Ben, yeah, I love you. Space skeletons, no. But, yeah, you got me thinking. It would be funny. Wouldn't fit the game at all, but yeah. Well, technically it's a cosmic horror, so yeah, maybe I could squeeze it in somehow.
Let's see. Avery asks, any plans for a demo?
Yes, Steam Next Fest this October. We're gonna hit hard on that and make a really nice demo for y'all to try it out. Hopefully, it'll be really, really like well accepted because we're gonna hit the Kickstarter the year after that. So it's like the plan is for February to get the Kickstarter out.
Okay.
Yep.
You mean you'll watch me break the game, right, Pony?
Well, yeah, I'll watch you as well.
Yeah.
I'm very curious on how you're gonna react to the game.
So I think with that, let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter and the plans for that. So, as you said, that you're planning on doing the Kickstarter for February, is that right?
Yep, that's the plan. We're gonna kick it off. I think it's gonna be September. I haven't really decided exactly the date because we're still talking to a lot of people about things, which I can't really disclose yet because we're announcing things in August. So yeah, but like if everybody follows me on Twitter Twitter is the best place because that's where I'm most active. And I'll always post things there about how it's going on. And
is the Nodbrim, is that the best account to follow?
That is the best account to follow if you're curious about this game. So yeah.
Okay, I'll put that in the chat, and if I didn't put that in the notes, I'll include that in the recorded version. So I guess obviously then with the Kickstarter, then you can't go into too much into specifics. No. I guess one question, again, if this is a spoiler, you can just say, my lips are sealed. Are you planning any kind of like backer exclusive rewards that can fit into the game?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, not only the game, but like as a side thing, there are some things we are planning extra for those who back the project. So there's some fun stuff. I can't really say much about what it is because it's still in the works. But yeah, I'm really excited. I'm like super giggly because I've already done a Kickstarter once, and that went well, thankfully. And people are so really friendly and nice. Like usually the backers are like super excited as much as I am. So we can share the fun once the backing kind of gets done. So of course it's a nail biting experience, but it's still.
Guess what are your thoughts on like Kickstarter or crowdfunding? Then, this is your second one or second time doing it.
Yeah, the last one I did was a comic book, so it's a little bit different. Uh, this one, like for games, I feel that it's a bit of hit and miss depending on what you're after. Like, I don't know. Like I've backed a couple of games, Star Citizen included, which is kind of still hanging there. So I'm a bit like mixed bag about backing games on Kickstarter, but still, those I backed, Darkest Dungeon, for example, it's one of the biggest hits ever, and I love that game to death. So that's thanks to Kickstarter, basically. So and they also started out like a small little indie team. So yeah.
Yes. Do you have, for developers watching, do you have any tips or anything that you're thinking about, or any suggestions that you're going to be adding to your Kickstarter for Westmark?
Oh, for anybody doing Kickstarter, plan ahead, work ahead, do everything you can to kind of be prepared before you hit the due date. Because once it's done or off to the races, you're basically just sitting there and hoping for the gods to grace you with their presence. So I don't know. Like, there's not much else to do. Like, there's so much information out on internet to kind of read up on how to do a successful Kickstarter. But in the end, you're mostly up there for if you're lucky or not, and if you have a big enough following, that's basically where it's at.
I guess with the Kickstarter, I'm sure this is definitely going to be an NDA related question, but do you have any? Are there any like content specific rewards, like in terms of like adding in more levels or more stories, enemies, that kind of thing?
Let's see how I can dance around this question. Well, there are some plans for things that I can't really disclose yet because we still ourselves don't know exactly how it's going to look. But I want to push in as much stuff we can for people to be excited about. So, of course, I don't want as much stuff as you guys want into the game. It's just a matter about like how much time I can spend on it and how much my teammate can spend on it, and like it's all about time and effort, basically.
Okay, so I guess as a bit of a logistics question, so the Kickstarter is planned for February. Do you have a rough idea following the Kickstarter for when the game will be released?
Can't say date, but it's within the year.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not going to be like, oh, we push a Kickstarter and then you're not going to see it for a year or two. So no, it's going to be fairly close to the Kickstarter, but it's not going to be like exactly the same dates or anything like that. It's just going to be, you'll see. Like, we're going to announce it fairly soon, like once we've done our announcing stuff.
And when it is released, will it be at 1.0 or will it go into early access?
No early access. It's just going to be premium, like one-off
Okay.
release. Yeah.
All right.
No worries.
And
we've done this before, and it was a nice experience. It was good. I have mixed opinions about the early access experience, but that's another topic for another day.
All right. So I think with that, again, like we could certainly go into spoiler territory for the Kickstarter, but we'll wait until closer to the Kickstarter, or maybe after that, to talk more about those plans. So
Exactly.
I guess I have one more design question for you, and then I think we'll wrap things up. Going back to kind of like the main topic, or one of the main ones we talked about today, and that is creating a original turn-based game. I wanted to ask you, I guess, for any like developers watching, especially those who work on their own, do you have any advice or guidance in terms of sitting there and creating a unique rule set, or unique mechanics? Like, for people who are wanting to create a game and go along those lines, do you have any suggestions for them along those routes?
Mm. Don't look at other games like a game that is played like a specific way. Just don't copy it right off. You can take aspects of it, like take 5% of what you like about that game. Take that and kind of distill it down to why is this interesting, and then take that, combine it with something else that you feel interesting, and then combine those two, and then you have something unique instead of just taking what you like there and just make that. It's like copy paste basically, but just more glorified. So yeah, like take time. Don't rush it. That's my biggest gripe with developers. Like they have an idea and they just run for it and not taking the time to think about it. I do that as well, but like I'm trying to kind of be mindful about just take it easy, think about it. So does it work? Why is it not unique enough, for example? And take inspiration from other places. Doesn't need to be games or like things like that. I mean, I looked at chess a little bit. It's still a game, but it's not a card game. And look at other like genres and see if you can steal from that.
And like you said, like it's about finding that nugget of what is unique or special. Because we've seen a lot of developers who will sometimes just copy as close to one-to-one as possible, and oftentimes they'll get it worse than what was that original concept. And I got a cough. There we go. No, my voice is starting to die, which is a good sign. That means we had a really good conversation.
Yeah, that's a good topic.
But it is very tricky to, when you're looking at a game, to figure out what what is the element that makes it special. Like Return to the Darkest Dungeon, I have asked, or I've seen so many developers who have just tried to copy the, dark and brutal motif, and that's it. Or, again, like, as I'm sure you're well aware of, I'm sure as the audience, there have been quite a few deck-building roguelikes that have come out since Slay the Spire. Only a few. Just like there's only been a few Vampire Survivors likes that I've been playing for the last 4 months.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to make a unique game. I admit it's almost impossible because there's so many out there, and the only way you can stick out is to either do something totally out there that is totally different and odd, and try and make a tutorial that is worth something. That way you're gonna hook them. That's the biggest problem, like tutorials. If you're making a very advanced turn-based game that is unique and not really like the others, you're gonna need some guidance for the player. Just saying.
Yeah, but onboarding and tutorials, that's another massive topic, especially for a game like this. I guess any quick thoughts on that? Again, we keep coming with final topics, which is on par for these kind of conversations. But I guess that is another really important question, though. When you're creating your own unique rules and your own unique, mechanics, how do you onboard that to somebody? Again, like we said, like turn-based games aren't very transferable in terms of their skills and the rule sets.
Yeah, the problem we have is like we're still like not anymore, but like we've been experimenting with the gameplay for quite a while. So making a tutorial is kind of impossible until you're done with the mechanics and the actual gameplay itself. And then you can start doing that. Like that's what we're doing now. Now we're doing tutorial. Before it's been like finding the fun, finding the nugget that you want to do, and then you're basically doing the tutorial, like teaching the player how to play, because now you know how it's going to be played, so it's easier that way. You don't want to make a tutorial before you're done with the actual core gameplay, because then there some developers have done that and they suffer for it. So yeah, I don't know until you're done.
Yep. All right. Well, I think with that we can probably wrap things up with my voice dying and so on. Plus, I think it's what, like a little after 11 where you are now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think I don't want to keep you.
But like, if anybody has questions, I'm on Twitter, so it's just hit me up if you have any.
All right, so I guess with that, before we say goodnight, then again, besides the Twitter that I included in the chat, and if it's not in the notes for the live version, it will be in the record version. Any other social media you would like to plug? You know, Facebook, Instagram, whatever.
I have a Discord. I'm there, but it's not really that active. I'm always there if anybody wants to chat. So I can give you the link for the Discord later, so you can put it in.
Okay.
So yeah. Otherwise, I'm trying to stay away from Facebook, all that stuff, because it's just distracting. Probably know what I mean.
All right. So, with that said, then, do you have any final points? Anything you'd like to say to fans watching? I guess, like, final word from you.
Final word. Makes me really sad. No, like stay creative, stay curious. That's like the most important part. Like, and don't stress out. Take naps. Drink a lot of water. I don't know what to say.
Have water with you at all times, especially if you're doing a lot of talking.
Yep.
All right. So I think with that, we will say goodnight. Amor, thank you so much again for reaching out.
Yeah.
And for coming on. And yeah, I'll be happy to check out the demo and everything when it is available. You said that the demo is planned for Next Fest in October, correct?
Yeah.
All right, I'll be looking forward to that. And best of luck with the Kickstarter next year.
Yeah, thanks. I'm looking forward to that.
All right. So,
cool.
For everyone watching, we will say goodnight here. As always, do the liking, subscribing, and commenting. Again, if you are a developer working on your own upcoming game and would like to come on and talk about it, please reach out to me. I'm on Twitter. Send me a message. Check out our Discord. Whatever way you would like to get in touch, feel free. I will be back later tonight for my nightly streams. And as always, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. So, Morin, if you are free in the future, I'll be happy to have you back on. We can talk more about turn-based and RNG nightmares then.
Yeah, would love to.
All right. So, everyone, have a great rest of your afternoon, and we will talk again real soon. Take care.
Ciao.